There's a number I want you to hold in your head right now. Half a meter, 0.5, 50 centimeters, that is all. Keep it there, because by the time this video is over, that number is going to mean something completely different to you. That number is the resolution of a satellite that was not built in America, a satellite that was not built in Russia, a satellite that, according to a document that was leaked earlier this week, has been quietly looking down at American military bases since late 2024. And what it has been looking at and what its pictures were used for is the story that almost nobody in mainstream media is telling correctly right now. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and the bell. What you are about to hear is not going to be in the evening news cycle by next week. The headlines move fast. The story underneath does not. New breakdowns drop as events develop. You do not want to catch up on this one after the fact. Subscribe now. Let us get into it. Here is what the Financial Times reported, citing leaked Iranian military documents. The satellite is called TE-01B. It was built and launched by a Chinese company headquartered in Beijing called Earth-I Co. And in late 2024, more than a year before the first American missile hit Iranian soil, it was acquired by the Aerospace Force of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, not Iran's civilian space agency, not a state-owned defense contractor, the Revolutionary Guard, the same organization that runs Iran's missile program, its proxy network, its hardline strategic planning. And the thing they went to China to buy, when they finally went, was not a weapon. It was eyes. The resolution on this satellite is half a meter, that number again, because it is the number that matters. Half-meter resolution is sharp enough to identify the specific type of aircraft sitting on a specific runway on a specific day. It is sharp enough to conduct pre-strike targeting. It is sharp enough to conduct post-strike damage assessment. It is the same order of magnitude used by Western commercial imaging firms that have supplied intelligence to NATO throughout the Ukraine war. It is the same resolution used by serious state actors who take reconnaissance seriously. And until late 2024, Iran did not have it. And here is where it gets specific. On March 13th, March 14th, and March 15th of this year, the satellite captured imagery of Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Prince Sultan is one of the most important American air facilities in the Gulf. On March 14th, the American president confirmed that aircraft at that base had been hit. 5 American refueling aircraft, KC-135s and KC-46s, the tankers that keep fighter jets in the air over long distances, damaged on the ground. 13 days later, a follow-on strike on the same facility wounded 12 American service members, 2 of them seriously. Think about what those dates mean. The 13th, the 14th, the 15th. That is 3 consecutive days of orbital imagery over the same American base, followed by a strike, followed by a gap of nearly 2 weeks, followed by another strike. That is not how coincidence works. That is how targeting works. That is a satellite being tasked by a military command to survey a target before and after it gets hit. Pre-strike reconnaissance, post-strike damage assessment, and then a follow-on strike adjusted based on what the pictures showed. And Prince Sultan was not the only one. The same satellite, according to the leaked documents, also imaged Muwaffaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, the American 5th Fleet Naval Base in Manama, Bahrain, Erbil International Airport in Iraq. All of them were hit by strikes claimed by the Revolutionary Guard in the same operational window. 1 satellite, 4 American bases, a dozen American service members wounded. And until a leak broke the story open, most of the people paying for the war had no idea the sky above their bases had been occupied for more than a year. Now I want to slow down for a moment because the part most people are going to miss is this. The Revolutionary Guard did not buy the satellite from a defense contractor. It did not buy it from a Chinese military institution. It bought it from a commercial company. And the ground stations it uses to command the satellite, to task its cameras, to download its pictures, those are operated by another commercial company called Emposat, also based in Beijing, with a network of ground stations that extends across Asia and into Latin America. That is the part that should keep defense planners awake at night. not the satellite itself. The architecture that made the satellite accessible, because for decades, export controls, the sanctions architecture that decides who can buy what from whom, was built around one idea: military-to-military transactions, tanks, aircraft, missiles. Those categories are watched. Those categories have paper trails. Those categories trigger enforcement. But commercial space is a different animal. A Chinese company launching a commercial imaging satellite is doing the same thing that Maxar does, that Planet Labs does, that half a dozen Japanese and European firms do. And the moment the control of that satellite can be quietly transferred to another customer, through intermediaries, through front companies, through the commercial plumbing that moves sanctioned goods every single day, the line between commercial and military evaporates. Call this the rented eyes doctrine. You do not need to build your own reconnaissance program. You just need to rent someone else's. And the implications of that cut across 3 layers, and each one is bigger than the one before. The first layer is tactical. 5 tankers is not a rounding error. KC-135s and KC-46s are what keep American air power moving. Without tankers in the air, a fighter jet launched from Qatar cannot reach a target in Iran and come home. Without tankers, the operational radius of the American military in the Middle East collapses. So when a satellite helps target 5 of them on the ground, the loss is not just the aircraft. The loss is the next 2 weeks of air operations that those tankers would have enabled. And the wounded personnel are not just casualties. They are the signal that someone on the other side of the equation now has the capability to see, strike, and adjust in a way American planners were not expecting. The second layer is structural, and this is the layer that nobody is connecting in the headlines. The export control system that governs which states can acquire high-end reconnaissance capability was designed for the 20th century. It was designed for a world where satellites were built by governments, launched by governments, and controlled by governments. That world is gone. The world we are in now has commercial satellites, commercial ground stations, commercial operators, and commercial intermediaries, and every single one of them can be quietly retasked for a state customer willing to pay. The rented eyes doctrine is not a loophole in a single deal. It is a feature of the entire commercial space economy, and every government that does not like the current security order is now studying it. The third layer, and this is the part that almost nobody is saying out loud, is about deniability. Beijing's foreign ministry told Reuters that the idea of Iran using a Chinese satellite to direct attacks on American targets is not true. That is the official position. That position is probably accurate at the level of explicit government orders. And it is also beside the point. Because the commercial architecture that made the transaction possible is itself the strategy. You do not need a Chinese official to order a satellite transferred to the Revolutionary Guard. You need a commercial company that can be quietly retasked and a ground station operator that does not ask hard questions. A system designed to be deniable produces deniable outcomes. That is not a bug in enforcement. That is a feature of the architecture. Step back from all of this and consider what the last 18 months actually look like from orbit. In late 2024, while Western intelligence services were focused on Iran's nuclear program, its missile stockpiles, its centrifuges, and its proxy networks, a Chinese commercial satellite changed hands. The imagery it had been collecting for one customer started flowing to another. For 15 months, American bases in the Gulf were being photographed, measured, cataloged. When the war came, the photographs had already been taken. The targeting had already been done. The runways at Prince Sultan had already been mapped. The placement of the tankers had already been studied. The first strike on March 14th was not the first look, it was the 100th. And here is what every adversary of the current order is taking away from this story. You do not need an enormous defense budget. You do not need a domestic space program that can survive sanctions. You do not need to build anything. You need a commercial partner willing to sell. You need a ground station operator willing to operate. You need intermediaries willing to move the paperwork. And everything else, the reconnaissance, the targeting, the damage assessment, the follow-on strikes, falls into place. The rented eyes doctrine is cheap, it is quiet, it is deniable, And according to what just came out of a leaked folder somewhere in Iran's Revolutionary Guard, it works. Now here is the counter-argument, because it deserves to be heard. Some people will say, correctly, that the United States and its allies also use commercial space. Maxar imagery has been central to American intelligence operations. Planet Labs provides coverage used by NATO militaries. European and Japanese commercial imaging firms contribute to Western surveillance. That is true. But the difference is not that one side uses commercial space and the other does not. The difference is that Western commercial space operates under export controls, under regulatory scrutiny, under a public legal architecture that, however imperfect, is at least legible. The commercial space sectors feeding the rented eyes doctrine do not operate under a comparable framework. And that asymmetry is what makes the doctrine so powerful for the states that know how to use it. The headlines are going to treat this as a story about one satellite. They are going to focus on Beijing's denial and Washington's reaction. That is the surface. The story underneath the surface is that the way reconnaissance capability gets acquired has fundamentally changed, and the architecture that changed it is still fully operational today. Not one satellite, an entire category of capability, available to anyone with enough money and enough patience to work through the right intermediaries. That is what just got demonstrated. That is what is going to get replicated. That is what the next war is going to start with, not a weapon. A pair of eyes rented from somebody else's commercial catalog. Do not look away from this, because the next conflict, whether it is with Iran again, with another state actor, with a capability buyer we have not yet identified, is going to begin the same way this one did. Not with a question about weapons, with a question about eyes. Whose eyes can we rent? And how long will they watch before anyone knows they are up there? So here's the question I want in the comments. The rented eyes doctrine. Eyes. Is it an enforcement problem that sanctions regimes can still close? Or is it a structural feature of commercial space that we all just have to live with from now on? Read the Financial Times report. Read the leaked coordinates. Read what Prince Sultan Air Base looked like on March 14th and ask yourself what half a meter of resolution can do in the wrong hands for 18 months straight. If this helped you see what actually happened here, subscribe and share it with one person who needs to understand. The headlines are going to forget this by next week. The architecture that made it possible is going to still be running, and the next satellite you do not know about is probably already in orbit.